I'm Chris Newton, creator of Feed, the Vampire Mythos RPG. In 10-Minute Mythos, I prove the endless possibilities of vampire role-playing by taking one random inspiration and using it to sketch out an original vampire mythos, all in 10 minutes. No prep, no script, just one gamer who loves a good vampire story. Wish me luck. Welcome to 10-Minute Mythos, episode number 13. Right now, I'm rereading the Divine Comedy, and I'm in the Inferno. And as I'm looking at all these layers of hell and these circles and these sub-circles in some cases, I think, wouldn't it be cool to have this as a neat, like, nested table, as you sometimes see in role-playing games? So, you roll your random table, your random circle of hell, and then perhaps there's like, oh, was he a suicide or was he whatever? So I decided to do that for this week's 10-Minute Mythos. I'm going to randomly roll a circle of hell. If appropriate, I will roll a sub-circle or whatever other subdivision Dante saw fit to put in there. And then we will run with that and try to use specifically that punishment or sin, and then also any other elements of the Inferno that we can bring to bear and create a vampire mythos out of it. So first, the D10 roll to determine the circle of hell. And if it's 10, we'll have to do something clever like use the woods from the beginning maybe. It's a 7. The 7th circle of hell is the circle of violence. And we have some subcircles there. We've got 3 rings. So I will roll for that. We got the middle ring, the ring of suicides and profligates, which is an odd categorization, but who am I to argue with Dante? The middle ring of the circle of hell for violent people. This is for people who committed violence against themselves or violence against their possessions by being amazingly wasteful or destructive of their inheritance or whatever. And the punishment, of course, is that you have the suicides who grow into trees, basically. Their souls become trees and are kind of preyed upon by the harpies and whatever. And then you have the wasteful people being chased by black mastiffs through the woods, the woods of the suicides. And then in the end days, when all the other souls get to go back to their bodies and re-inhabit their bodies, the suicides, because they threw their bodies away, are specifically not allowed to do this, but instead the bodies are like hurled at the trees and stuck on the branches. Let's see, what in there is cool that we can use? Lots of things. I really like the black mastiffs and being hunted as a punishment. That is something we will definitely try to include. Secondly, the separation of the body and the idea that the soul is separate from the body as a punishment. I really like that as well. Those 2 things, starting with those, and then also just general stuff about Dante, bringing in sin, perhaps bringing in literal hell, the idea of a spiritual guide of some kind, and also the sort of general purpose of the Inferno in moral terms, which is, the advancement of a person from their sort of basest instincts and worst sins all the way to, salvation. So we'll try to bring all those things together. So the first thing is the separation from the body. Now, having a person whose soul becomes a tree or something like that maybe would not work quite so well. But I like the idea that this could perhaps be almost a ghost story type of thing where the soul goes into an object. Perhaps it could be the grave site, or it could be some object that was of special value to the individual, the deceased. And then the body, they're not allowed to take control of, but in fact is somehow used as a punishment for them. So what you could do actually is have rather an interesting situation where the vampire, in this story, vampirism as it is understood in mythology is a misunderstanding. It is not that the dead rise again and their bodies claw their way out of the grave and then they go prey on the living. No, instead, it is an unquiet soul whose body is this kind of bestial predator that rises from the grave. But the soul is not even in the body. The body is set loose on the world. In fact, you could go back to some early vampire literature, not quite all the way back to folklore, but to the early vampire literature, like Polidori's The Vampire, where the deceased kind of comes back and specifically is after their loved ones. I'm thinking of like Christabel here, that kind of stuff too. The body comes back basically as a punishment for what you did in life. Your soul is kept alive in some kind of vessel and has some ability to act, right? Some limited power to influence the world because you need to be able to play these characters. But the body then rises separately from that and starts trying to destroy like your family, your friends, and is like this monster that you are now responsible as a spiritual creature for putting down. And you have to do this by somehow transcending your own sins, whatever this punishment is for that you have brought upon yourself. And maybe this ends in reclaiming the body, or possibly this ends in just simply putting the body to rest and allowing the soul to pass on. So what you could do here is have I'm thinking about this guide connection, because in the Inferno, the connection between Virgil and Dante is really interesting. You have an almost worshipful writer who is guided by the soul of his predecessor, his inspiration. But Virgil himself is not like at the top of the mountain in terms of the spiritual progress, right? Because he's a non-Christian. So what we could do perhaps is have I don't know if the player character here could almost be a composite. It could be a combination of the soul of the deceased and some kind of medium, or someone who can act in the physical world. Just an idea. You could have like two characters going on here, and then you'd have the body. So you'd have a really nice 3-part thing going on where each player character would be like the medium or the family member or whatever, like the psychic sensitive person who's aware of this deceased soul trying to improve itself. You'd have the soul trying to improve itself and lay the body to rest, and then you'd have the body, which looks like the deceased, going out and hunting and all that stuff. And basically, instead of, because the way the normal feed mechanics work, you can have compulsions that you're forced to roll, and if you fail, then you will feed or act out violently or whatever is appropriate to the type of vampire that you are, whatever strain you've constructed. And you can have temptation conflicts where you kind of have to choose between feeding and your normal like functioning and your human traits. And if you fail your rolls there, then you will have to indulge. Your addiction takes over. You lose a human trait in favor of a vampiric one, right? Here, if you lose a compulsion, it's that the body goes and does something. You may not even be in the same scene with it. Here, if you lose a temptation, it's that because you as a soul are unable to overcome your sin, you permanently lose contact with one of the little glimmers of hope for you, one of your little ways out of damnation, and the body gets stronger. The body becomes more powerful hunter as your sin is confirmed. So the vampiric traits and the human traits are kind of split between two different beings, but it's the body and the soul of the person, basically. So this is turning into something kind of really interesting, and it brings the thing in feed that is normally on the more narrative level, which is the struggle to kind of redeem yourself potentially and deal with your own demons, puts that literally into the story as like, it's urgent. You are a soul that cannot move on to the afterlife, and furthermore, your body has risen to ruin you as a result of your sins, and you must attempt spiritual progress or your body will destroy everyone. So yeah, I like this idea, and I'm not sure whether they're like a medium, like a physical character, an avatar in the world should fit into it somehow, or whether the soul should just be able to act in some other capacity. I'm thinking about what players actually do at the table, which is a big part of the story profile. Like, it's great to have a high concept, but then what do you actually do here? And I think it would be really helpful to have a medium, basically, a physical character for the characters to play. On the other hand, it could complicate matters because you now have to deal with sort of the medium and the soul in a way where it sort of feels like there might be conflict between the two characters, which would get in the way of thematically of the spiritual progress. So what you could do is perhaps you play, I'm thinking of the preacher story, the Saint of Killers, the framing sequence, where it's like the young kid, the assassin, talking to the old guy who tells him the story. So what it could be is that you play a human character who is mired in the sin of the deceased, the same sin. Not maybe literally, like you didn't wrong the same people, but the same type of sin. So in this case, it's violence, right? And it could be violence against anybody. It could be, suicide or whatever. Basically, like spilling blood. or destruction. You are guilty of destruction in some way. So that way it can maybe apply to property in strange cases, like ruining the family's fortune or destroying somebody's good name or whatever. But you destroyed something in the same way that this deceased person destroyed something. They are now cursed. They're wandering the earth as a disembodied spirit who can perhaps give advice or whatever, but they're basically mired in sin. You are not yet confirmed in that sin. As a punishment, their body has risen, and you are now linked to this spirit. This spirit, as its punishment, is hooked to you. You're now haunted by it, and can like communicate it with it mentally, and maybe get some information from it, whatever. But it's now trying to get you to change your ways and take you through spiritual progress to avoid the mistakes that it made, which you can now see with hindsight. And if you do, then the body is put to rest. And if you don't, then the body will become stronger and stronger as you kind of wither away, as you become lost to sin. The body of the predator gets stronger. So my time is up. I am actually very intrigued by this concept, and it would be very unusual for play at the table. It almost makes me think more of like a story game. But that's one of the nice things about Feed. It's flexible enough that if you want to go in a more story game direction with more like direct narrative controls and all that stuff, you can. So you can definitely have that journey of spiritual redemption or growth or decline into hell. So there's a lot of specifics and lore that need to be worked out here, but I think the essential play experience is unique and interesting. So good on Dante for that. There is so much in the Divine Comedy that can inspire gaming and has inspired gaming. But that's my 10 minutes. So there you have it. 10-minute Mythos.